Zach Wilson has been here before, and we know how he responded last time. What happens tonight against the Las Vegas Raiders? I'm Glenn Naughton with JetNation.com. Be sure to log into JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. So, NFL insider Diana Rossini, if you missed this, reported yesterday that the Jets were going to be sticking with Zach Wilson, barring some type of disaster. The only issue with that comment is who defines disaster? Because there are plenty of Jets fans who would say the offense, for the most part this season, has been a disaster. The way the Jets played last week against the Chargers, one of the worst defenses, if not the worst, that they faced this year, offense was a disaster. And listen, we've heard it from Robert Saleh, we've heard it from Bart Scott, you heard it if you listened to us on Jet Nation Radio the other night, myself, Dylan Terman, Chris Schubert. It's not all on Zach, but by far, because the offensive line is terrible. The receivers aren't separating. The receivers aren't catching the ball when it is thrown on target. So there's a lot going wrong. But in terms of a disaster, again, who's making? Are we talking? There's got to be 4 interceptions. What if there's no turnovers, but you're still not scoring points? What if you're playing the Oakland Raiders again, another defense that isn't very good? They're terrible against the run. What happens if you're sitting there in the third quarter and you're trailing 6-0 and your defense is keeping the Raiders out of the end zone, but you're still staring a loss in the face? Is that a disaster or is that acceptable? So here's to hoping we don't find out. Here's to hoping Zach Wilson goes out and plays a really good game, because despite what bloviating talk show radio hosts may be saying about when the biggest game of his life is or isn't about to kick off, it wasn't. This is another game. You don't have to go back that far. I mean, listen, that loss to the Chiefs might feel like it was 10 years ago, but it wasn't. The 23-20 loss to the Chiefs on the 1st of October. That, to me, and I said at the time, I thought was the biggest start of Zach's career. Why? Because the offense was struggling. It was going to be prime time. It was going to be against the defending Super Bowl champion, and you had just brought Trevor Siemian in. Like, to me, that was the game where the closest this team has been to sending Zach a real message and saying, we're bringing another guy in because you're not playing well. And Zach Wilson went out, and he had the best game he's played this year. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen again. As Dylan Terman just pointed out on Twitter a little while ago, that game right now you could say is an outlier. It was in terms of production. And look, there have been some games this year, and we've talked about it, where Zach Wilson played absolutely fine. Not great, but he played good football, but the results weren't there because, again, O-line terrible, receivers terrible. Every time you're getting into, second and short, third and short, you're getting a penalty. Now you're in second and long, third and long. So Zach's been bad at times. The offensive line has been atrocious at times. The receivers have been terrible at times outside of Garrett Wilson. So this begs the question, at what point does Nathaniel Hackett start doing some things that are more beneficial to the quarterback? When do we see some rollouts, like playing to Zach's strength, but roll it out more? They went up tempo a little bit last week, which we said they should, and as Robert Saleh pointed out after the game, they did have some success moving the ball when they went up tempo. So go up tempo, get your tight ends involved. I mean, Jeremy Ruckert's got 4 catches this year. I'm sorry, but he's better than that. You can disagree with me, that's fine. Jeremy Ruckert is on another team, he'd be putting up some numbers right now. I'm not saying he'd be going to the Pro Bowl. I'm just saying he'd damn sure have more than 4 catches. So Jeremy Ruckert, get him involved, get Uzama involved, as I said last week, your receivers can't get open. You don't have a viable option at wide receiver outside of Garrett Wilson. Now, we saw a couple catches for Xavier Gibson last week. Let's get Jason Brownlee some targets. Let's get some other guys involved, because the guys you're throwing the ball to right now, not working out. Randall Cobb and Alan Lazard might be 2 of the worst wide receivers in the NFL right now. And if they're playing significant reps today and nobody's getting open and Zach is taking sacks, and I said after the game last week, when everyone's talking about all the sacks Zach is taking, look how long he's holding onto the ball. Several sacks. There was nowhere to go with the ball. So if you're not moving the ball and you have to score points and nobody's open, maybe you don't feel like you can afford to just throw it away and waste it down. Like you're holding on, waiting for someone to come open, and nobody does. However, that being said, if you go back and watch the coach's film, you will see plays where guys were open and Zach Wilson didn't pull the trigger. So that's on Zach. So as we said, he's been good and bad. Offensive line pass blocking has been bad, especially the last couple weeks. I mean, between the Giants and Chargers, it seemed like the quarterback was under a season's worth of pressure in those two games. The hits, the sacks, just absolutely out of control. Actually, better against Philly than I expected them to be. But that brings us to this guy, Xavier Newman, who came in the following week against the Giants. Might be getting his first Jet start today. He had one start previously with Tennessee. Obviously filled in backup duty a couple weeks ago against the Giants, but he's activated again. Dwayne Brown, not active. Some people thought he might be. Robert Turner, inactive, broken bone in his hand. So that tells you Max Mitchell is probably kicking back out to tackle, which opens up that guard spot. And unless Roger Saffold, and I wouldn't rule out Saffold. I know that Robert Saleh said earlier in the week Saffold wasn't in football shape. However, I think we're still waiting on Robert Saleh to say something true about someone whose status is questionable. Whether it's an injury or prepare, whatever it may be. If Saleh says a guy's not ready or he can't go, chances are he's going. So don't rule out Saffold, but Newman as well. Like I said, they've added him, added Malik Taylor too, who is weirdly enough one of the veterans of this group, which it feels weird to say because he doesn't have a lot of football. He hasn't played a lot of football at the pro level. But given the fact you have a couple of undrafted free agents on your roster at wide receiver, Malik Taylor is one of the more experienced guys. So the big question, though, Malik Taylor, whether it's Malik Taylor or Garrett Wilson or Xavier Gibbs, whoever it is, how is Zach Wilson going to respond? We saw him in this situation once earlier this year where the offense was floundering. They needed a win. They were in prime time. And obviously against the Chiefs, they didn't get that win, but he did enough. And when after that game, I said, even if the Jets struggle for the next few weeks, Zach, he saved his job for the foreseeable future. Like, you knew he wasn't losing his job in that game, and you knew that game would carry him through, that if he had a few rough weeks, people could look back and say, but look at the Kansas City game, but look at well, now you need a new game. You need another one. You can't just have a good game every 5, 6, 7 weeks. So you're playing a poor defense. I know you're on the road, but you're playing a poor defense, and you're playing against a team. I discussed this, or I mentioned this last week when the Raiders made the move at head coach. Teams tend to respond well when a coach gets fired, because normally it's a guy that the team isn't crazy about. For a guy to get fired in season, it's got to be a disaster, and the team knows that. So normally when a guy gets fired in season, the team gets pumped up, they get psyched up, they rally, they pull off a win. As I mentioned last week, we saw it with Jeff Saturday in Indy, and then we saw it this past week with the Raiders with Antonio Pierce. So now this, hopefully for the Jets, because Jets need a damn break. They just need a win to try to get things rolling again. Hopefully this is the come down for the Raiders. Regress to the norm. You got a rookie quarterback going against an elite defense, but you still have to put some points on the board. So Zach Wilson, this again becomes the new biggest start of the year for him, because the team, despite the fact that he's still out there, they're not going to let him keep going out there and not putting up touchdowns. If they lose today, you lose to the Raiders tonight, 9-3 or 6-3, something like that, and all you need to do is put up a touchdown, and you couldn't get it done, Zach Wilson's job is in jeopardy. It has to be. So, big game for Zach Wilson tonight. He's been here before. Exact same situation he was in against Kansas City, and he came out and he played a really good game. Through his only multi-touchdown game of the year, which is just crazy. In today's NFL, to have a starting quarterback with one multi-touchdown game is absolutely nuts. But keep protecting the ball. But let's see the tight ends get involved. Let's see him roll out a little bit, get him on the move, doing what he's comfortable doing, and see if they can come away from this thing with a win. Second time this year, Zach, I won't say his job's on the line because, again, according to Rossini, it's got to be a disaster, which you could argue we've already had that. But still a big game for him on the road. Got to get this team back on track tonight. We'll see what happens. Jets Raiders. I'm picking the Jets. I think they managed to pull this one out, regardless of the quarterback play, because I can't see the Raiders doing enough with a rookie quarterback against this defense. But stranger things have happened, folks. Pick six, fumble gets picked up and run back for a touchdown like we saw last week. All of a sudden, the Jets lose this game. So it's a game I expect them to win, but it is a very losable game. When you're not scoring, anybody can beat you. Have a good one, Jets fans. We will see you after the game in about, 19, 20, 21 hours. We'll see you then. Have a good one.